Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, A Real Story. The snow fell silently over Cambridge, Massachusetts, blanketing the cobblestone streets in pale silver. Inside a dimly lit study, a man leaned over his desk, pen trembling in his fingers. His beard had gone white, his face lined with grief and years of quiet endurance. This was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the poet whose words once stirred a young nation, but whose life bore wounds deeper than any stanza could heal. Longfellow's life was no tale of uninterrupted triumph. It was a journey marked by love, loss, resilience, and the cruel beauty of survival. Act I, The Dreamer. In 1826, a young Henry boarded a ship bound for Europe. He was only 19, already restless, carrying a notebook brimming with sketches of poems, and a heart burning with ambition. The United States was still a fledgling country, hungry for its own voice in literature. Henry believed he could be that voice. Europe overwhelmed him. The cathedrals of Spain, the piazzas of Italy, the philosophy of Germany, he devoured it all. His nights were spent copying phrases, his mornings lost in translations. Languages became his weapon, his bridge between worlds. When he finally returned to America, he carried not just books and notes, but a determination to make poetry as essential to his young nation as bread and air. At Harvard, his lectures on European literature dazzled students. But while others saw a rising scholar, Henry carried a private ache, a yearning for a love that would anchor him. And when he met Mary Storer Potter, he thought he had found it. Act II, The First Blow. Mary was radiant, a quiet New England beauty whose smile disarmed his anxiety. Their courtship was tender, almost old-fashioned. They married in 1831, and for a brief time, Henry's life bloomed. Days filled with lectures, nights filled with laughter and soft conversations at the fireside. But happiness proved fragile. In 1835, while the couple traveled in Europe, Mary fell ill. What began as weakness became fatal. Henry, only 28, sat helplessly by her bedside as she slipped away in Rotterdam. The young poet, who once filled notebooks with promise, now filled them with sorrow. He wandered Europe a broken man, writing in his journal, "One thought occupies me day and night, she is dead. All day I am weary and sad." When he returned to America, he returned alone. Act III, Love Rekindled. Years passed before Henry dared open his heart again. But fate introduced him to Frances Fanny Appleton, the daughter of a wealthy Boston industrialist. Fanny was sharp, witty, and stubborn. At first, she rejected him. She found him too solemn, too wrapped in his melancholy. Yet Henry persisted not with pressure, but with patience. For 7 long years he courted her, sending poems, letters, gifts. Finally, in 1843, her heart softened. She accepted him, and their marriage became a sanctuary. With Fanny, Henry found not just love, but a family. Their home in Cambridge rang with children's laughter, the clatter of carriages, the warmth of evening gatherings. During these years, Henry wrote some of his most enduring works: Evangeline, the Song of Hiawatha, Paul Revere's Ride. He became the voice of America's soul, his verses recited in schools, printed in newspapers, sung in homes. To many, he was untouchable, almost mythic. But the private man still carried shadows. He knew joy could vanish in a heartbeat. Act IV, The Fire. It was a July evening in 1861. The summer air was heavy, the war between North and South had just begun to divide the nation. At the Longfellow home, Fanny sat near the window, sealing locks of her children's hair in envelopes with hot wax. A small, sentimental act of motherhood. Then it happened. The candle tipped, the wax ignited her dress. In moments, Fanny was engulfed in flames. Her screams tore through the house. Henry rushed to her, trying desperately to smother the fire with his own body. His face, hands, and beard were seared. But it was too late. Fanny died the next morning, leaving Henry burned not just in flesh but in spirit. For weeks, he could not bear to speak. His journal read only, "How I am alive after that scene, I do not know." From then on, he wore a thick white beard not as fashion, but to cover the scars on his face. Behind that beard, he hid a broken heart. Act V. The Father. The Civil War raged outside, but inside his house, Henry faced a different battle. He was now both father and mother to his children. His eldest son, Charles, ran off to join the Union Army without permission. Henry, still mourning, was struck again with dread the possibility of losing his child to war. When Charles was badly wounded, Henry rushed to Washington to bring him home. Walking through hospitals filled with shattered young men, the poet who once wrote of heroism now saw only ruin. Yet even in despair, he picked up his pen. His grief and longing gave birth to one of his most haunting poems, The Cross of Snow, a sonnet written 18 years after Fanny's death, where he confessed that the pain never lifted. Act 6, The Legacy. In his final years, Henry became a symbol of literary America. Admirers from across the world visited his Cambridge home. Students memorized his verses. Immigrants found in his poems the rhythm of a new homeland. But privately, he remained the man who had survived two great losses, who had carried fire in his skin and silence in his soul. He died in 1882, surrounded by family, mourned by a nation. Flags were lowered, newspapers wrote tributes, and in Westminster Abbey's Poets' Corner, a bust of Longfellow was placed, the first American poet to be honored there. Epilogue. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's story was not just about poetry. It was about the cost of living, the endurance of love, the resilience of a man who turned suffering into words that outlived him. He was the dreamer who believed America needed poetry, the lover who lost twice, the father who burned for his children, the man whose verses carried both the sunlight of hope and the shadow of grief. And perhaps that is why his words still breathe today, because they were written not by a legend untouched by pain, but by a man who walked through fire and kept writing anyway.